What if the familiar stories of faith only reveal a fraction of the Bible's profound narrative? Deep within its pages lie unsettling passages, often overlooked or deemed too challenging to confront. These shadows, however, hold crucial, unvarnished truths waiting to be unveiled. Most people, when encountering these disquieting verses, tend to either rationalize them away or simply skip past them, finding them difficult to reconcile with a message of hope and light. Modern sensibilities often recoil from the harsh realities depicted in ancient scripture, leading to a selective interpretation that glosses over the uncomfortable. Yet to truly grasp the monumental scope of divine justice, the complexities of human nature, and the raw history of faith, we must bravely venture into these forgotten corners. Avoiding the darkness doesn't make it disappear. It merely leaves our understanding incomplete, denying us the full, transformative truth embedded within every line of sacred text. Today, we embark on an unflinching journey, pulling back the veil on these uncomfortable parts of Scripture. We will not shy away from the difficult questions or the challenging narratives presented in these ancient texts. Each passage, though unsettling, is not an error but a crucial pillar in the grand tapestry of the divine narrative, demanding we confront its deepest complexities. Prepare to discover why these dark moments are not anomalies, but essential threads revealing profound lessons about consequence, covenant, and the unyielding nature of God's character. These are the hidden stories that reshape perspective, waiting in plain sight within the dusty scrolls. This is not merely an academic exercise, it is an expedition into the very heart of biblical truth, a journey that promises to fundamentally reshape your understanding. We are about to uncover the 11 darkest passages of the Bible, accounts that few dare to explore, each holding a hidden lesson often missed. The interpretations and revelations we're about to unveil will challenge your preconceptions and deepen your appreciation for Scripture's breadth. Stay with us, because the full spectrum of this divine narrative, in all its light and shadow, awaits your discovery. Your journey into the deepest shadows begins now. Imagine a world so broken, so lost, that its very existence grieved its creator. Before the Great Flood, the biblical narrative paints a stark picture of a pre-diluvian earth steeped in pervasive evil. Humanity's imagination was consumed by wickedness, with every inclination of the thoughts of its heart being only evil continually. Violence became rampant, a dark stain spreading across the land, corrupting all living things. From the divine perspective, this moral decay reached an unbearable zenith. The Lord looked upon the earth and saw its utter corruption, a profound disappointment in the creation he had brought forth. This widespread depravity set the grim stage for an impending, radical divine response, a reckoning that would redefine the very boundaries of judgment. The Creator's grief turns to an ultimate decree. The world must be reset. The Scripture records that the Lord was grieved that he had made mankind on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. This was not a casual decision, but a profound, melancholic sorrow that led to an absolute, uncompromising decree. God declared his intention to blot out mankind from human beings to animals, and even the creatures that move along the ground and the birds in the sky, for he regretted having made them. This divine sorrow was inextricably linked to the decision for total annihilation, signifying a moment when divine love, faced with unyielding corruption, gave way to an absolute and devastating judgment. Walls of water, skies turned to endless deluge. The world wasn't just cleansed, it was utterly erased. Then, the cataclysm was unleashed. The narrative describes how all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened. Torrential rains poured down for 40 days and 40 nights, while subterranean waters surged upwards, engulfing mountains and valleys alike. The waters rose, covering every high mountain under the entire heavens. Every living thing that moved on land, whether human or beast, perished in the overwhelming deluge. It was a chaotic, terrifying spectacle of divine fury, a global cataclysm that swept away all life and every trace of civilization, leaving only the relentless, churning waters. Can you fathom the sheer, unyielding power of that divine fury? Inside the ark, a fragile seed of life. Outside, an ocean of death. Amidst the terrifying chaos, one solitary vessel floated upon the boundless expanse of water, Noah's Ark. Within its confines, Noah, his family, and the selected animals were isolated, adrift in a world utterly drowned. For many months, the Ark was the sole beacon of life in a vast, silent, waterlogged tomb. The outside world, once bustling with humanity and teeming with creatures, was now a desolate, submerged wasteland. This profound isolation underscores the absolute nature of the destruction, leaving the survivors as a lonely testament to the cost of a world utterly lost to its own wickedness, a chilling reminder of the complete absence of any other life. Beyond the Sunday school stories, the flood represents an unyielding divine hand. The darkness of the flood narrative lies not just in its destructive scale, but in its uncompromising demonstration of divine justice. It reveals a God whose holiness demands a radical response to pervasive evil, an absolute eradication when corruption reaches its peak. This event stands as a foundational example of divine judgment, setting a chilling precedent for future instances of severe divine action in the biblical narrative. The flood etches into the very fabric of Scripture a profound and sometimes unsettling lesson that divine patience has its limits, and the consequences of unchecked wickedness can be absolute and total, echoing across millennia as a solemn warning. Escaping fire and brimstone, Lot's family found themselves in a desolation far greater than the ruins they had left behind. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was swift, an apocalyptic rain of fire and sulfur obliterating the cities and the entire plain. As the smoke billowed and the earth groaned, Lot, with his 2 daughters, fled the inferno, urged by angels to not look back. His wife, however, could not resist the fatal glance, transforming into a pillar of salt, a stark monument to disobedience. Now the 3 survivors stumbled through an ash-covered, smoking landscape, their hearts heavy with fear and the terrifying realization of absolute loss. What terrors can drive desperate souls to unimaginable acts? The desolate aftermath forced Lot and his daughters to seek refuge in a remote mountain cave. Here, isolated from all known civilization, a profound and existential dread began to set in. The daughters, looking out at a world seemingly wiped clean of humanity, became consumed by a chilling fear. They believed they were the last remaining humans, and with them, the last hope for their lineage. "Our father is old," the elder daughter observed, "and there is no man on earth to come in to us, as is the custom of all the earth." Trapped in a cave, believing they were the last of humanity, a chilling solution began to form in their minds. How far would you go to prevent utter extinction? This profound isolation, coupled with the perceived threat of utter extinction, led to a desperate and morally ambiguous plan. The elder daughter, driven by an urgent desire to preserve her family line, proposed a shocking solution to her sister. Their plan was simple, yet deeply transgressive. They would get their father drunk and, in his unconscious state, lie with him to conceive children. The younger daughter, seeing no other path to continuation, agreed. With no other men, a plan so shocking, so morally twisted, was hatched in the darkness of the cave. What desperation could justify such a profound transgression? Over 2 successive nights, the daughters executed their plan. Each evening they plied their father with wine, dulling his senses until he was unaware of his actions. The elder daughter went in first, lying with her father, and he knew neither when she lay down nor when she arose. The next night, the younger daughter repeated the act. Both conceived, their desperate acts yielding the immediate outcome they sought. Lot remained unwitting, a tragic figure caught in the moral chaos born from catastrophe. In the depths of their despair, the unthinkable became reality, twice over. What does Lot's unwitting participation reveal about the moral chaos born from catastrophe? From these profoundly dark and morally compromised acts, 2 sons were born. The elder daughter named her son Moab, who would become the ancestor of the Moabites. The younger daughter named her son Ben-Ami, who became the father of the Ammonites. These 2 nations, born from incest and desperation, would go on to have a complex and often hostile relationship with Israel throughout biblical history. This passage forces us to confront the messy, often unsettling foundations of certain biblical lineages and divine purpose. From these dark origins sprung entire nations, enemies of Israel. What does this passage force us to confront about the messy, often unsettling foundations of biblical history and divine purpose? Facing impossible odds, a desperate leader makes a vow so extreme its cost is unimaginable. What promise, made in the heat of battle, could lead to such profound tragedy? In a period of profound instability within ancient Israel, when external threats loomed large, a figure named Jephthah, though marginalized by his own family, was called upon to lead the Gileadites against the oppressive Ammonites. He was a man of action, but also of deep-seated custom, understanding the binding nature of an oath before the divine. Before engaging in the fierce conflict, Jephthah made a solemn conditional vow to the Lord. "If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the doors of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will offer it up as a burnt offering." This desperate promise, forged in the crucible of war, carried an unknown yet potentially devastating consequence. The cheers of victory echo, but a dark shadow looms over Jephthah's triumphant return. Who will be the first to meet him, and what will their innocent greeting cost? The battle against the Ammonites was indeed a resounding success. The Lord delivered them into Jephthah's hands, and Israel achieved a decisive victory, driving back their aggressors. With the conflict concluded, Jephthah began his journey home, surely anticipating a hero's welcome. The sounds of celebration and triumph would have filled the air, the relief palpable among his people. Yet, as he approached his house in Mizpah, an undercurrent of dread, an unseen shadow began to settle. The terms of his rash vow, made in a moment of desperate seeking for divine favor, now awaited their fulfillment. The face of pure joy, his own daughter, becomes the devastating answer to his vow. Can a sacred promise truly demand such an unbearable, unthinkable price? As Jephthah neared his home, ready to receive the accolades of his people, the first to emerge from his household was his only child, his beloved daughter. With tambourines and dancing, she came out to greet her victorious father, her face alight with innocent joy. The sight, intended to be a moment of pure celebration, instantly transformed into an unbearable tableau of tragedy. Jephthah tore his clothes in despair, a profound gesture of grief and agony, revealing the crushing weight of his vow and the devastating personal cost it now demanded. His jubilant return had become a procession of sorrow. In an act of astonishing resolve, Jephthah's daughter accepts her fate, only asking for time to mourn a life unlived. What profound, dark lessons does this teach us about the unyielding power of an oath? Jephthah, his heart shattered, explained the solemn vow he had made to the Lord. To his astonishment, and in an act of remarkable courage and profound acceptance, his daughter did not recoil in anger or rebellion. Instead, she responded with a stoic resolve, urging her father to fulfill his promise to the Lord, since God had granted him victory. Her only request was for 2 months to go into the mountains with her companions and mourn her virginity, her unlived life, her inability to bear children and carry on her father's lineage. Was it literal sacrifice or a life of consecrated solitude? Either way, Jephthah's vow stands as one of the Bible's darkest ethical dilemmas. What does it reveal about the terrifying weight of promises made to God? The tragic story of Jephthah's vow has long been a source of profound debate and discomfort. While some scholars suggest his daughter was literally offered as a human burnt offering, a practice abhorrent to God and later forbidden, others interpret her fate as a dedication to lifelong virginity and service in the tabernacle, a form of spiritual sacrifice. Regardless of the exact nature of her end, the passage remains dark. It underscores the absolute inviolability of vows in ancient Israel, even rash ones, and the terrifying personal cost of promises made to God. This uncompromising narrative forces us to confront the severe consequences that could arise from human desperation and the unyielding nature of divine commitments, linking this profound personal tragedy to a broader understanding of sacrifice and divine expectation throughout Scripture. In a tumultuous era of ancient Israel, a time when central authority was fragmented, and, quote, everyone did what was right in their own eyes, a Levite from the hill country of Ephraim set out on a journey. His destination was Bethlehem in Judah, to retrieve his concubine who had returned to her father's house. After reconciling with her, they began their homeward journey, accompanied by a servant and 2 donkeys. As evening descended, they found themselves near Gibeah, a city within the tribal territory of Benjamin. The setting sun cast long, unsettling shadows across the dusty roads, and a subtle unease began to settle over the travelers. What awaited them in the city of Gibeah? A brief haven in a hostile city, but the kindness of one man cannot hold back the tide of depravity. What monstrous demand will shatter their fragile safety? As darkness fully enveloped Gibeah, the Levite and his companions searched for lodging, yet no one offered them shelter. It was an old man, a fellow Ephraimite who resided in Gibeah, who eventually took them into his home. He recognized the perils of the city, stating, "Peace be with you. Let me supply all your needs. Only spend the night in the square." Inside, a warm glow offered temporary respite from the chilling emptiness of the streets. Yet the old man's worried glances towards the door hinted at a deeper, unspoken threat that hung heavy in the air, a threat only momentarily held at bay by his hospitality. The night turns to horror as a depraved mob pounds on the door, demanding the unthinkable. What unspeakable alternative will be offered in a desperate attempt to appease them? Their brief peace was brutally shattered. Before the travelers could even settle, the house was surrounded by a mob of wicked men from Gibeah. Pounding on the door, they shouted their demand to the old host. "Bring out the man who came into your house, that we may know him." Their intention was clear and vile: to sexually assault the Levite. The old man, horrified, pleaded with them, urging them not to commit such a wicked act, reminding them of the sanctity of his home. In a desperate, morally compromised attempt to divert their depraved attention, he offered his own virgin daughter and the Levite's concubine instead. Thrown to the wolves, the concubine endures unspeakable horrors, her fate a chilling testament to a society's utter collapse. What brutal act will follow this desecration, igniting a nation's fury? In a shocking display of moral failure, the Levite took his concubine and pushed her out to the mob. The men seized her, abusing her throughout the night, perpetrating unspeakable horrors upon her. As the first light of dawn began to break, they finally let her go. She stumbled back to the house, collapsing at the doorstep, where she lay until morning. This wasn't merely a crime against an individual. It was a profound testament to a society that had completely lost its moral compass, a dark stain etched into the very fabric of ancient Israel. In a move of shocking, visceral protest, the Levite dismembers his concubine, sending her body parts across Israel. What unimaginable horror could drive a man to such an act, demanding righteous vengeance? At dawn, the Levite rose, opened the door, and found his concubine lying on the doorstep, her hands on the threshold. He called out to her, but there was no response. She was dead. Overwhelmed by the horror and injustice, he placed her body on a donkey and returned to his home. There, in an act of shocking, desperate protest, he took a knife, laid hold of her body, and cut her into 12 pieces. These gruesome fragments he sent throughout all the territories of Israel, a visceral message intended to ignite a nation's fury and demand an accounting for the unspeakable crime. A nation united in righteous fury, demanding justice for an unspeakable crime. But what dark consequences will this quest for vengeance unleash upon Israel itself, tearing the tribes apart? The effect was immediate and profound. When the Israelites saw what had been sent to them, they were utterly aghast. Such a deed had not been seen or committed since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. All the tribes gathered at Mizpah, unified by shock and outrage. They cried out, "No such thing has happened or been seen from the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt until this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak your mind." This unparalleled act of violence and retribution set a grim benchmark for the depths of human depravity, ultimately leading to a civil war that would nearly annihilate the tribe of Benjamin, tearing the very fabric of Israel apart in its quest for vengeance. Beyond simple conquest, the command to annihilate the Canaanites stems from a deeper, darker reason: generations of unspeakable practices. What abominations finally pushed divine patience to its breaking point? As the Israelites stood on the threshold of the Promised Land, they looked upon a territory steeped in profound moral corruption. The biblical accounts paint a vivid picture of Canaanite society, deeply entrenched in practices abhorrent to the divine order. Their altars burned with child sacrifices, dedicated to gods like Moloch. Ritual prostitution and widespread sexual immorality blurred the lines of sacred and profane. Divination, sorcery, and occult practices were commonplace, weaving a dense tapestry of spiritual darkness. For generations, this iniquity had festered, yet the divine hand had shown immense patience, allowing their wickedness to reach its full measure before the inevitable judgment. The command is chillingly clear: utterly destroy. But what does it mean when the divine directive includes even women and children? And how do we reconcile this with a benevolent God? This was the chilling directive delivered to Israel, the command of Hiram, or utter destruction. In Deuteronomy and other texts, God explicitly instructed his people to show no mercy, to make no treaties, and to leave no survivors among certain Canaanite nations. You must utterly destroy them. The command reads, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, just as the Lord your God has commanded you. Hiram was not merely conquest, it was a sacred ban, a total consecration of a city and its inhabitants to God through their complete eradication, preventing spiritual contamination of the nascent Israelite nation. Jericho's walls fell, but what followed was not just conquest, but total annihilation. This wasn't merely war, it was an execution. What chilling precedent did this set for divine justice? The fall of Jericho stands as a stark testament to the Hiram command in action. After the miraculous collapse of its formidable walls, the Israelites surged into the city. The command was carried out with uncompromising precision. Every man, woman, and child was put to the sword. Only Rahab, the prostitute who had aided the Israelite spies, and her family were spared, a testament to her faith and a singular exception within the sweeping judgment. Jericho was then burned with fire, its treasures dedicated to the Lord, leaving no survivors, no spoils, and a profound, indelible mark on biblical history. Even partial disobedience to the utter destruction command brought swift, brutal defeat. What dark message about divine expectations does the tragedy of Ai engrave into the biblical narrative? The severity of the Hiram command was further underscored by the events at Ai. Following Jericho, Israel suffered a humiliating defeat, not because of superior Canaanite strength, but due to a breach of the sacred ban. A man named Achan had secretly kept forbidden spoils from Jericho. This act of disobedience, though hidden from human eyes, brought divine wrath upon the entire community. Only after Achan's sin was exposed and punished was Israel able to re-engage Ai, this time carrying out the Hiram command meticulously, emphasizing that absolute obedience was paramount when executing divine judgment. How do we reconcile a loving God with the command to destroy entire populations, including children? This is perhaps the darkest ethical puzzle in all of Scripture. What answers, however unsettling, can we find? For modern readers, these commands present a profound ethical dilemma. The destruction of entire populations, including children, challenges conventional understandings of divine love and justice. Theological attempts to reconcile this often point to the pervasive nature of Canaanite evil, arguing that such radical measures were necessary to prevent the spiritual corruption of Israel. Some interpretations suggest that God, as the giver of life, also has the sovereign right to take it, or that these acts prevented an even darker future for the innocent within a deeply depraved culture. This remains a deeply unsettling aspect of the ancient text. This dark command forces us to confront a radical form of divine justice, alien to modern sensibilities. What does it teach us about the absolute nature of God's holiness and His unyielding stance against ultimate evil? The Hiram command thus represents a radical form of divine justice, executed against pervasive, entrenched evil that had reached its absolute limit. It underscores the profound holiness of God and His uncompromising stance against spiritual contamination. While deeply uncomfortable for contemporary ethics, it reflects an ancient worldview of corporate responsibility and divine sovereignty, where God acted as the ultimate judge over nations. This chapter establishes a recurring theme of radical divine judgment against pervasive evil, setting the stage for similar events and reinforcing the biblical context for extreme measures. A city renowned for its wickedness, its cry, reaching heaven itself. What unspeakable depravity in Sodom and Gomorrah compelled God to unleash a judgment unlike any other? The ancient cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were steeped in a profound moral decay, their reputation for depravity so pervasive that their very existence became synonymous with extreme wickedness. Accounts describe a society lost to arrogance, gluttony, and a profound indifference to the poor and needy, all culminating in widespread sexual immorality and violence. The corruption was not merely isolated acts, but a systemic rot that infected every facet of urban life. This deep-seated sinfulness, a continuous affront to divine order, ascended as a cry to the heavens, drawing the direct attention of God Himself. The stage was set for an intervention unlike any seen before, a divine response to an iniquity that had grown great and was now beyond redemption, Abraham's desperate plea to save Sodom, a powerful negotiation with the divine. But what dark truth will be revealed when even 10 righteous souls cannot be found within the city walls? Before the final judgment, a remarkable intercession unfolded. Abraham, having learned of God's intent to destroy Sodom, engaged in a poignant dialogue with the divine. He boldly bargained, questioning if the city would be spared for 50 righteous souls, then 45, then 40, then 30, 20, and finally for just 10. With each reduction, God affirmed His willingness to spare the entire city for the sake of even a small number of righteous inhabitants. This divine patience and openness to Abraham's plea highlighted a profound principle. God's justice is always tempered by mercy, always seeking a reason to save. Yet, the persistent reduction of the number of righteous souls hinted at a dark truth about Sodom's spiritual condition, foreshadowing its ultimate fate. The arrival of 2 strangers exposes Sodom's true horror, as a mob demands unspeakable acts. This dark encounter seals the city's fate, proving Abraham's worst fears. The final confirmation of Sodom's profound wickedness arrived with 2 angels, disguised as men, who entered the city at dusk. They were met by Lot, Abraham's nephew, who, alone among the inhabitants, offered them hospitality and shelter for the night. But the peace was short-lived. Before they could lie down, the men of Sodom, from every quarter of the city, surrounded Lot's house. Their purpose was terrifyingly clear. They demanded that Lot bring out his guests so they could know them, a chilling euphemism for sexual assault. This brazen collective demand for such a vile act, targeting even guests in a host's home, eliminated any doubt about the city's irreversible depravity. It was the ultimate demonstration that not even 10 righteous people could be found, confirming the necessity of the impending judgment. Fire and brimstone descend from the heavens, consuming 2 cities in an instant. This terrifying spectacle of divine wrath leaves no doubt about the absolute consequence of unchecked evil. As dawn broke, the angels, having blinded the aggressive mob, urged Lot and his family to flee, warning them not to look back. With Lot, his wife, and 2 daughters barely escaping, the skies above Sodom and Gomorrah opened not with rain, but with a horrifying deluge of fire and brimstone. From the very hand of the Lord, burning sulfur rained down, engulfing the cities and the entire plain. The destruction was swift, absolute, and utterly devastating. Buildings crumbled, flesh was consumed, and all vegetation was incinerated. It was an apocalyptic spectacle of divine wrath, a terrifying demonstration of the absolute consequence of unchecked evil, and a profound lesson in the gravity of God's judgment against pervasive sin. A single glance back, a moment of forbidden longing, and Lot's wife is frozen in time. What dark lesson about obedience, attachment, and the cost of the past does her fate impart? Amidst the terror of the unfolding destruction, a specific, chilling tragedy occurred. The angels had issued a clear, urgent command: "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain." Yet as the fiery cataclysm consumed her home, Lot's wife, perhaps out of longing for her past life, a desperate curiosity, or an act of disobedience, cast a look back at the burning cities. In that instant, her disobedience was met with immediate, absolute judgment. She was transformed into a pillar of salt. Her fate stands as a stark, dark warning within the narrative, not just about literal looking back, but about the dangers of clinging to a life of sin even when divine salvation is offered, emphasizing the necessity of complete detachment from wickedness. Sodom and Gomorrah stand as an eternal monument to divine wrath. What enduring, dark message does this fiery judgment scream across millennia, warning against the ultimate cost of unchecked wickedness? The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, with its terrifying fire and brimstone, is etched into the biblical narrative as one of the most profound and enduring warnings against sin and divine judgment. This event serves as a stark reminder of God's uncompromising stance against pervasive evil and His absolute sovereignty over human affairs. For millennia, these cities have symbolized the ultimate consequence of unchecked wickedness, pride, and depravity, becoming a universal byword for divine retribution. The dark message resonates not just as an ancient historical account, but as a timeless theological principle, compelling all generations to confront the profound cost of moral corruption and the unwavering nature of divine justice. Fleeing a mad king, David sought sanctuary with the priests of Nob, accepting sacred bread and a legendary sword. Saul, once anointed by God, was now consumed by a dark, spiraling paranoia, seeing threats in every shadow, especially from the young warrior David. Desperate and hunted, David arrived in Nob, a city of priests near Jerusalem, where he encountered Ahimelech, the high priest. David, feigning a secret royal mission, urgently requested provisions and a weapon. Ahimelech, unaware of the true gravity of David's flight, offered the only food available: the consecrated showbread, reserved for priests, and the very sword of Goliath, a trophy of David's past glory. But a dark, unseen witness ensured this act of kindness would have a bloody price: an act of priestly mercy, offering sacred provisions to a desperate fugitive. Ahimelech's actions were born of genuine compassion and religious duty, yet his unwitting aid would soon draw the wrath of a paranoid king, sealing his own dark fate. After confirming David's urgent need and the ritual purity of his men, Ahimelech broke sacred protocol to provide the showbread, understanding its necessity for survival. He then gave David the sword of Goliath, wrapped in cloth, a potent symbol of past victories now wielded by a man on the run. Ahimelech believed he was assisting a loyal servant of the king, a misunderstanding tragically fueled by Saul's escalating madness. His kindness was pure, his intentions honorable, but the consequences would prove devastatingly grim. A loyal servant, or a treacherous informant? Doeg the Edomite's chilling report weaponizes an act of mercy, twisting it into treason. How quickly can paranoia turn a king's heart to murderous fury? Doeg, an overseer of Saul's shepherds and a man with a chilling capacity for malice, had been present in Nob during David's visit. He observed Ahimelech's generous, yet unsanctioned aid to David. Returning to Saul's court, a place already thick with suspicion and fear, Doeg twisted the facts into a narrative of conspiracy. He reported that Ahimelech had not only consulted the Lord for David, but had also provided him with food and a weapon, painting a picture of deliberate collusion against the king. This calculated betrayal ignited Saul's already unstable mind. Blinded by paranoia, King Saul condemns an entire priestly lineage to death for a perceived treason. What happens when a king's rage overrides all justice and reason, leading to a dark, bloody command? In a fit of unchecked fury, Saul summoned Ahimelech and all the priests of Nob to his court. He accused them of conspiring with David, aiding his enemy. Ahimelech, bewildered, earnestly defended his actions, explaining his innocent belief that David was still the king's loyal servant. He pleaded his case with integrity, but reason had abandoned Saul. The king, consumed by his madness and convinced of their guilt, declared a terrifying and unjust decree. "You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and all your father's house." Even the king's own guards refused to spill innocent priestly blood, a moment of moral defiance in the face of tyranny. But if Saul's men won't obey, who will carry out his bloody decree? Saul then commanded his royal guard, "Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they too have sided with David." Yet, in a remarkable act of moral courage, the soldiers, hardened veterans though they were, refused. They understood the sanctity of the priesthood and the profound injustice of the command. They would not raise their hands against the Lord's anointed priests. This unexpected defiance, a glimmer of conscience in a dark reign, further enraged Saul, but he could not force them to comply. Doeg the Edomite, a willing executioner, slaughters 85 priests and annihilates an entire city, leaving only one survivor. This dark chapter reveals the terrifying depths of a king's paranoia and the cost of unchecked power. With Saul's own men refusing, Doeg the Edomite stepped forward, eagerly embracing the heinous task. Without hesitation, he fell upon the priests, slaying 85 men who wore the linen ephod. But his depravity did not end there. Doeg then extended the massacre to Nob itself, the city of priests, putting to the sword every living thing: men, women, children, infants, oxen, donkeys, and sheep. Only Abiathar, one of Ahimelech's sons, managed to escape, carrying the ephod and fleeing to David. This brutal episode showcases the depths of human evil fueled by paranoia and sets a precedent for the consequences of rejecting God's anointed, foreshadowing Saul's own fall. Following in Elijah's powerful footsteps, Elisha journeys to Bethel, a city known for its spiritual strength. What unexpected, dark encounter awaits him on this seemingly peaceful path? After the dramatic ascension of his mentor Elijah, the prophet Elisha was now to carry the mantle of divine authority. His journey took him from Jericho, a city recently touched by his miraculous hand, towards Bethel. This ancient city held a complex history, once a significant spiritual site, but by Elisha's time, it was notorious for its idolatrous calf worship, a deliberate rejection of true Yahwistic faith established by Jeroboam. The road was dusty, the air thick with the subtle decay of a people straying from their covenant. Elisha walked, perhaps deep in contemplation of the weighty task ahead, unaware of the immediate, profound challenge that lay just beyond the city's limits. A prophet of God, mocked and ridiculed by a band of youths. Their insolent taunts, "Go up, you bald head," are more than insults. They are a direct challenge to divine authority. What shocking retribution will follow this disrespect? As Elisha approached Bethel, a group of young men, described in the original text as small boys or youths, emerged from the city. Their behavior was far from innocent. They began to mock Elisha, shouting, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" This was no mere jest about his appearance. The taunt was a direct challenge to his prophetic legitimacy, a contemptuous reference to Elijah's recent ascension into heaven. They were essentially daring Elisha to ascend as well, questioning his authority and connection to God. In a culture where respect for elders and prophets was paramount, this was an act of profound insolence and disdain for divine representation. In a moment of chilling power, Elisha turns and curses the mocking youths in the name of the Lord. What terrifying supernatural force is about to be unleashed in response to their disrespect? Elisha, hearing their scornful cries, turned to face the jeering youths. His demeanor, though calm, carried the undeniable weight of divine authority. The prophet did not engage in a verbal spat or a physical altercation. Instead, he invoked a power far greater than his own. The text states, "He turned around, looked at them, and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord." This was not a personal outburst of anger, but a pronouncement of judgment, a stern decree issued with the full backing of the God he served. The air around them seemed to thicken, a palpable tension as the words of the prophet, charged with divine power, hung ominously over the disrespectful crowd. From the woods, 2 bears emerge, unleashing a brutal, bloody attack that leaves 42 youths dead. This isn't just a curse. It's a terrifying, visceral demonstration of the consequences of mocking divine authority. What dark lesson does this event truly hold? The consequences were immediate and terrifying. As Elisha's curse echoed, 2 female bears suddenly emerged from the nearby woods. These were not mere wild animals acting on instinct. Their appearance and actions were a direct, supernatural response to the prophet's invocation. The bears fell upon the mocking youths, mauling an astonishing 42 of them. The scene was one of sudden, brutal violence, a visceral demonstration of divine retribution against those who dared to openly scorn God's chosen messenger. The joyous taunts were replaced by screams of terror, as a seemingly innocuous insult met with overwhelming, deadly judgment. Was the punishment too severe? This dark passage forces us to confront the terrifying gravity of disrespecting divine authority. What chilling message about reverence and consequence does it send, even today? This incident, undoubtedly one of the Bible's darkest and most unsettling, raises profound questions about divine justice and its severity. Many struggle with the perceived harshness of the punishment for what appears to be a childish prank. However, biblical scholars interpret this not as a trivial matter, but as a severe warning against despising God's messengers and, by extension, God himself, particularly in a context of widespread idolatry and spiritual decline. The youth's mockery was a public challenge to Elisha's prophetic authority, a direct affront to the divine order he represented. This swift and uncompromising judgment underscored the terrifying gravity of God's holiness and the absolute necessity of reverence for his divine word, serving as an indelible reminder of the consequences of blatant disrespect in ancient Israel. Slavery in the Bible, a deeply uncomfortable truth. But before we condemn, we must understand the nuances of servitude in the ancient world. How did biblical law compare? And what dark distinctions did it make? The institution of slavery, as unsettling as it is to modern sensibilities, was a pervasive and integral part of virtually every ancient society across the Near East. From the great empires of Egypt and Mesopotamia to the smaller city-states, various forms of servitude were common. It was within this harsh, pre-existing social and economic landscape that the Mosaic Law, given to ancient Israel, also outlined regulations concerning slavery. These laws did not abolish the practice outright, but sought to govern it, introducing principles that, while imperfect by today's standards, often stood in stark contrast to the more brutal codes of surrounding nations. Not all slavery was created equal, even in the Bible. What dark distinction did God's law draw between Hebrew servitude and the more brutal chattel slavery of foreign nations? And what does it reveal about ancient ethics? The biblical texts make a crucial distinction between different types of servitude. Hebrew servants were typically individuals who sold themselves into service due to debt or extreme poverty, often as a temporary measure to survive. Their servitude was generally limited to 6 years, after which they were to be released, often with provisions. This form of servitude resembled indentured labor more than lifelong bondage. In contrast, foreign slaves, or those acquired through other means, were treated more akin to perpetual chattel property, inheritable by offspring, much like in other ancient societies. These distinctions, while still morally challenging, reveal an attempt to apply a different ethical framework to fellow Israelites than to outsiders. From crushing debt to the spoils of war, biblical law outlines specific paths into slavery. What dark realities of ancient life do these regulations address, And how did they attempt to govern such an uncomfortable institution? Individuals could enter servitude through several avenues. Poverty and debt were primary drivers, with people selling themselves or their children into service to repay debts, or simply to ensure survival during famine. This offered a grim form of social safety net, preventing starvation or total destitution. Capture and warfare also led to enslavement, a common practice in all ancient conflicts. Additionally, foreign slaves could be purchased from other nations. These methods underscore the harsh realities of life in the ancient world, where survival often dictated one's status, and the biblical laws attempted to regulate these acquisitions within a framework of justice and, at times, mitigation. Despite the harsh realities, biblical law included surprising protections for slaves, even granting freedom in cases of severe injury. What does this dark system's attempted justice reveal about the ancient world's moral compass? While the institution itself remains a challenge, the Mosaic Law did implement regulations designed to protect slaves from wanton cruelty. Laws prescribed severe penalties, even death, for a master who murdered a slave. If a master caused permanent injury, such as knocking out an eye or a tooth, the injured slave was to be set free. This marked a significant departure from many contemporary legal codes that offered little to no protection for slaves. Furthermore, Hebrew servants were guaranteed release after 6 years of service, and all Israelite slaves were to be freed in the year of Jubilee, demonstrating a unique emphasis on liberty and restoration within the covenant community. The Hebrew servant could choose to remain enslaved for life, marking himself permanently through a chilling ritual. What does this dark choice reveal about the complex interplay of loyalty, family, and desperate circumstances in ancient society? One of the most perplexing provisions allowed a Hebrew servant, upon reaching their 6th year of service, to voluntarily choose perpetual servitude. This choice was often made if the master had given the servant a wife, who, as a foreign slave, would not be freed, and children during their term, meaning freedom, would necessitate abandoning their family. In a solemn ceremony, the servant would declare their desire to remain with their master, and the master would then bring them to the doorpost and pierce their ear with an awl, marking them as a permanent bondservant. This dark choice highlights the profound social and familial pressures that could bind an individual more tightly than any chain. The Bible's slavery laws remain a profound, dark challenge. What do these ancient texts demand of us today? Forcing a confrontation between historical context and our deepest moral convictions. The biblical laws concerning slavery present an enduring ethical challenge for modern readers, forcing a confrontation between ancient societal norms and contemporary moral standards. Theologians often interpret these laws not as divine endorsement of slavery, but as a progressive attempt to regulate and humanize an already existing institution within a specific historical context, laying groundwork for its eventual obsolescence. They represent an accommodation to a fallen world, while simultaneously planting seeds of justice, dignity, and eventual freedom that would ultimately undermine the practice. This ongoing intellectual challenge compels us to grapple with the Bible's full, unvarnished narrative, understanding its text within its own historical and cultural framework, even when it clashes profoundly with our deepest convictions. A triumphant procession brought the Ark of the Covenant home amidst joyous celebration. King David, filled with fervent devotion and a desire to centralize Israel's worship, orchestrated a magnificent event. The Ark, the most sacred artifact of Israel, symbolizing God's presence among His people, was being moved from the house of Abinadab to Jerusalem. Crowds gathered, jubilant with music, dancing, and shouts of praise. To transport the holy object, a new cart was commissioned, drawn by oxen, a method chosen with great fanfare. Yet, beneath the veneer of triumph and joyous celebration, a single, unexpected stumble would soon unleash a terrifying demonstration of divine holiness, turning this moment of national fervor into profound tragedy. What dark line would be crossed, and what ancient, forgotten law would be brutally enforced? The procession moved forward, a vibrant tapestry of sound and movement, until it reached the threshing floor of Nacon. Suddenly, chaos erupted as the oxen stumbled, causing the sacred Ark of the Covenant to lurch violently. The precious cedar cart swayed, and the Ark, with its cherubim wings poised, threatened to fall to the ground. A collective gasp rippled through the assembled multitude as the celebration instantly dissolved into alarm. In that moment of panic, one man, Uzzah, driven by a seemingly natural instinct to protect the holy, reached out his hand to steady the Ark. He was utterly unaware that he was about to cross a terrifying, ancient boundary, a line of divine command established centuries before. What would be the immediate, shocking consequence of this well-intentioned, yet forbidden, touch? As Uzzah reached out and touched the Ark, the narrative takes a chilling turn. In an instant, God's anger flared, and Uzzah was struck dead on the spot, collapsing beside the very object he sought to protect. A single, well-intentioned touch, and Uzzah fell dead instantly. The joyous music ceased, the dancing stopped, and a profound silence fell upon the jubilant multitude, broken only by the sudden, horrifying realization of what had just transpired. This wasn't just punishment. It was a chilling, dark reminder of the absolute, untouchable holiness of God, a visceral demonstration of divine boundaries. What does this terrifying event demand we understand about divine reverence and the strictness of God's sacred laws? David's reaction to Uzzah's death was a complex mix of emotions. His joy turned to a potent blend of fear and anger at the Lord's sudden, devastating wrath. He was both distressed by the swift judgment and deeply afraid of the God who had acted with such finality. "How can the Ark of the Lord come to me?" he questioned, his voice echoing the profound awe that gripped everyone present. David's fear turned to anger, and the Ark's journey was immediately halted. The procession, once a symbol of triumph, was abandoned, and the Ark was diverted to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite, where it would remain for 3 months. What profound, dark message about the terrifying holiness of God does Uzzah's death embed in the very heart of Israel's worship, forcing even its king to reconsider his approach to the divine? Uzzah's death, though seemingly harsh and perplexing to modern sensibilities, unveils a dark truth about the absolute holiness of God and the terrifying gravity of his commands. This incident was not arbitrary. It served as a stark reminder of explicit Mosaic laws regarding the Ark of the Covenant. Numbers, chapter 4, verse 15, specifically forbade touching the holy objects. Only the Kohathite Levites were permitted to carry the Ark, and then only by its poles, never by hand. Uzzah's action, however well-intentioned, was a direct violation of this sacred command, a transgression against the very holiness of God. This story demands that we never forget the profound lesson about reverence, obedience, and divine power, underscoring that God's holiness is not to be trifled with, and His laws, however strict, carry severe consequences when disregarded. By Babylon's rivers we sat and wept, longing for Zion. This is the bitter context for one of the Bible's darkest, most unsettling prayers for vengeance. What unspeakable pain birthed such a brutal plea? The Book of Psalms, a collection of sacred songs and prayers, often expresses the full spectrum of human emotion, from joyous praise to profound lament. Few passages, however, plunge into such depths of raw despair and vengeful fury as Psalm chapter 137. Its backdrop is the traumatic Babylonian exile, a period of profound national suffering for the Israelites. Torn from their homeland, their temple destroyed, they found themselves captives in a foreign land, their hearts heavy with grief and an aching longing for the fallen city of Jerusalem. Taunted to sing us one of the songs of Zion, the exiles' refusal is a testament to their profound anguish, but this pain will soon twist into a chilling, dark prayer for unimaginable retribution. Against whom will this fury be unleashed? As they sat by the rivers of Babylon, their captors, filled with a cruel mockery, demanded that they sing us one of the songs of Zion. But how could they? Their harps hung silently on the willow trees, their voices choked with sorrow. To sing the songs of their beloved God in the land of their oppressors, for the entertainment of those who had destroyed their home, was an unbearable desecration. Their refusal was an act of defiant sorrow, a testament to their profound anguish and a silent protest against their forced captivity. Then, the unthinkable prayer. Blessed is he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. This dark verse, born of unimaginable suffering, forces us to confront the raw, brutal depths of human vengeance, even in Scripture. But who else is implicated in this curse? This profound sorrow and humiliation eventually erupted into a prayer for retribution, a cry for divine justice against those who inflicted such pain. The psalmist first declares a curse upon himself if he forgets Jerusalem, then turns his gaze to Babylon, the great oppressor. He wishes for their destruction, a common theme in ancient warfare. But then, the psalm plunges into an unfathomable darkness, uttering a verse that has shocked readers for millennia. O daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction, happy is he who repays you for what you have done to us. Happy is he who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Remembering Edom's betrayal, joining Babylon and shouting, "Lay it bare as Jerusalem fell." This dark history fuels the psalmist's fury, adding another layer to the chilling prayer for vengeance. What does this reveal about ancient loyalties and grudges? This shocking verse, however, is not the psalmist's only target. Before turning his attention to Babylon, he invokes a curse upon Edom. Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations. Edom, a neighboring nation and a people related to Israel through Jacob's brother Esau, had not only stood by during Jerusalem's destruction, but had actively encouraged the Babylonians, perhaps even participating in the looting. This betrayal by a brother nation added a layer of bitter indignation to the psalmist's prayer for vengeance, making their inclusion in this dark imprecation particularly poignant. This dark blessing for infant destruction is a raw, agonizing cry from the depths of human suffering. What does Psalm chapter 137 force us to confront about the true cost of war, the nature of vengeance, and the complex tapestry of divine justice? This passage, undoubtedly one of the Bible's darkest, confronts us with the raw, unvarnished reality of human suffering and the desperate desire for vengeance born from profound injustice. It is a terrifying window into the depths of human pain, a cry for an equally brutal reckoning in a world where war knew no mercy. While it reflects the psalmist's visceral emotional response, it is crucial to understand this as an expression of human anguish, a lament, not necessarily a divine endorsement of such violence. It forces us to grapple with the uncomfortable truth that even in Scripture, the cries for justice can be shockingly brutal, revealing the complex tapestry of ancient ethics and the long shadow of divine retribution. We have now navigated some of the most profoundly unsettling narratives within Scripture. From the uncompromising judgment of the Great Flood and the chilling implications of Jephthah's vow, to the moral complexities of Lot's daughters and the devastating massacre at Nob, each passage forced us to confront aspects of divine power and human depravity that challenge conventional understanding. We grappled with the Aram command against the Canaanites, the swift, terrifying wrath upon Sodom, and Uzzah's instantaneous death for touching the ark. These are not easy texts. They are designed to provoke, to question, and to push the boundaries of our comfort. Yet in wrestling with these shadows, we gain an indispensable, fuller picture of the biblical narrative, revealing layers of meaning often overlooked. The darkness we have explored is not an anomaly, but an integral part of the Bible's intricate tapestry, revealing a God whose justice is as absolute as his mercy is profound. These accounts, however difficult, serve as crucial pillars, demanding a more comprehensive and unflinching engagement with the divine narrative. They force us to move beyond simplistic interpretations, to appreciate the full spectrum of a sacred history that refuses to be confined to comforting narratives alone. Understanding these challenging moments is not about dwelling in despair, but about recognizing the depth, complexity, and sovereign power embedded within every line of Scripture. If this journey into the profound shadows of the Bible has sparked your curiosity, be assured, The depths of its mysteries are far from exhausted. Prepare for even more breathtaking secrets that lie just beneath the surface. Continue your exploration and uncover the hidden codes and untold stories that await. Don't miss the next revelation.